The message of Chanuka, become more comfortable with your faith. That's what Chanuka is all about. There was the few in the hands of the many, the weak in the hands of the strong. But these small group of Jewish people stood up for what they believe in because they had faith and they were very comfortable with your faith. Being comfortable with our faith means it's part of who I am. I'll do anything for it because that's me. That's just who I am. Judaism isn't just a culture like the Greeks wanted it to be at the time. It's me. It's my identity. The Maggid of Kuznets teaches something that kind of reframes how we think about Chanuka in the context of faith. Generally, the theme of Chanuka is illuminating the outdoors, illuminating the darkness outside. And that's why the Gemara says that you should actually light the menorah outside, and that's what Jews actually used to do. In Israel, many still do it. But in practice, we actually light the menorah indoors. Many light it by a window. Some specifically don't light it by a window, but light it near a door, but not necessarily visible to the outside. Why? Isn't the theme lighting up the outdoors? The Maggid of Kuznets explains that these days, the outdoors and indoors are quite similar because of the darkness of exile. So it used to be light on the inside, spiritually speaking, dark on the outside, go outside and light it up. But these days, the inside is similar to the outside. We got to light up the inside. So Chanuka is about becoming more comfortable with our faith, not only externally, but internally on the inside. But how do we become more comfortable with our faith? How do we become more comfortable with our Judaism, with our identity as Jews? In general, there's two ways. Inspiration or education. What's the difference between the two? So here's the difference. Inspiration is not something that you choose. It's something that happens to you. It happens against your will. It leaves against your will. Education is a choice. It's something that you actually choose to do. And to become uneducated, once you're educated, takes a lot of work. You know what it's like? It's like the difference between falling in love versus growing into love. You don't have to do anything to fall in love. You got to be at the right place at the right time with the right person. But you also don't need to really do anything to fall out of love. It just happens. Easy come, easy go, as they say. But to grow into love takes intention, takes work. And when that happens, it's less likely that one will grow out of love. Because again, that's going to take intention as well. It's like the difference between relying on external sunlight, just happens, but at some point the sun's going to set. You can't just have sunlight. You got to have lights in your home if you want it to be light all the time. And Chanuka is about turning on that internal light, not just relying on external light. It's about growing into love with God, with our Judaism. It's about being educated, not just being inspired. So I'll give you an example. Inspiration is helpful, by the way. We're not anti-inspiration. But again, your motivation due to inspiration is only going to last as long as the inspiration does. So if one was motivated, I remember a couple of years ago there was unfortunately a catastrophe that motivated somebody to come to shul. They came to shul and they said, you know what, I got to start taking my Judaism more seriously, my Jewish identity. This was an anti-Semitic catastrophe, and we got to support the shul, we got to support the synagogue, and we got to show up. And he came to synagogue. And he hasn't been since, and this is no judgment to him. This is a judgment on inspiration. That's what inspiration does. You feel good at that moment, and you make decisions. But are they going to last? But what if my observance was motivated not just by inspiration, but by education? I understood the value of observance, the value of coming to shul, or the value of whatever I needed to do. Well, that understanding isn't going to go away. The inspiration, the feeling might go away, but the understanding isn't going to go anywhere. And you know where you see this, by the way, in Judaism? You see this by the exodus of Egypt. When the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, they didn't really leave because at some point they were re-chased by the Egyptians, cornered by the sea, and finally the sea split for them. And that was the moment. That was the moment where they experienced God's presence. That was the moment where they experienced that we're actually free. And they experienced God, and you know what they said? Ze keli va'anvehu. This is my God, and I glorify Him. Elokei avi, the God of my fathers, va'aramamenhu, and I exalt Him. They extolled God. They experienced God. But there's a beautiful explanation from the Shlach HaKadosh, Rabbi Yeshaya Horowitz, from the 1500s. And he explains, Zeh Keli v'anvehu, this is my God, and I adore him, I adorn him, I glorify him. If God is my God, he's personal. I'm educated about who he is. He's relevant to me. He's my God. I'll glorify him. Elokei Avi Arei Mamenhu. If he's the God of my fathers, if he's only God because I heard from my fathers, I was inspired, or some external, just passed down from generation to generation, but I didn't take ownership or responsibility or intentionality, I'll exalt him. He's exalted. He's abstract. He's not necessarily relevant. We realize that when we became a people, if we want this to be sustainable, we can't just rely on the tradition we have from our parents, although that is important. We can't just rely on inspiration. We gotta become educated. We gotta become intentional. We gotta approach our relationship with God, not just wait for it to happen to us. Try to grow in love with God. Try to grow into love with the Torah. Grow into love with our observance. Grow into love with our Judaism. Not just wait to fall in love. And that's what Chanuka is all about. Chanuka is the festival of lights, but it's also the festival of enlightenment. Chanuka, actually, the word Chanuka literally comes from the word chinuch, education. Because Chanuka is about educating ourselves about our Judaism, and not just the light of Chanuka, the inspiration of Chanuka, but it's enlightenment. And that's something we got to do on our own. It's something we got to be intentional about. The Greeks didn't want Jewish education. That's what the big fight was about. They didn't want us to study the Torah. They didn't want us to study it as God's Torah. That's what Chanuka is. Education. Chanuka means we resolve to become more educated about who we are, to become more enlightened, not just inspired. People are inspired on Chanuka. Chanuka is naturally inspiring. You meet Jews from all over the place. They come out of the woodworks and they just celebrate Chanuka. It might even be the most celebrated Jewish holiday because it's inspiring. But if we take the opportunity to become more educated, if we take that inspiration and motivate ourselves to become more educated about who we are, it will endure way beyond Chanuka. Chanuka is the only holiday, by the way, that has no Talmudic tractate dedicated to Chanuka. You have a couple of pages about Chanuka and tractate Shabbos. But when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, you have tractate Rosh Hashanah in the Talmud. An entire tractate dedicated to explaining Rosh Hashanah. And same thing with Yom Kippur, tractate Yuma. Purim, even though it's a rabbinic holiday, you have Purim, which is tractate Megillah, Pesach, Pesachim, Sukkah. All the holidays have their own dedicated tractate. Chanuka does not. And the Baal Shem Tov explains, because when it comes to light, you can't just have somebody else teach you about light. It's got to be your own tractate. You got to write it yourself. You got to write the story of your light. And that starts through education. It's something we got to approach. Education is something we got to do. We got to sit and study and learn and put in the effort to become more comfortable and knowledgeable about who we are. It's not just going to happen externally. And when we do that, it endures. It doesn't flee. Reb Shlomo of Karlin, he was the Talmud of Reb Aaron of Karlin. He used to light his Hanukkah candles specifically with wax. Preferably, we're supposed to use olive oil. That's what the miracle happened with. Technically, you can use anything, but the preferred candles are actually with olive oil. If you can't use olive oil, use some sort of other oil. But he preferred wax, and as Chassidim asked him why, he explained, because oil, a little bit, if it spills or whatever it is, you clean it up fine. Wax drips. And when it drips, the wax is just there and it stays there. Oil drips, you clean it up, fine. But Hanukkah candles that are made with wax, the wax drips and the wax is stuck there. And way beyond Hanukkah itself, I'm still reminded of the message of the holiday. Education lasts much longer than inspiration does. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Happy Hanukkah, friends.